Hello and welcome, my friends, my froze, my Wi-Fi warriors, my offline champions, and my fierce battlers. I am here today after the final Smash Ultimate patch to give my current opinion on the state of Ike. As a master swordsman and fierce battler myself, I can definitively speak on this issue. I'm going to go through every matchup Ike has alphabetically. So, if you're looking for your character and how they do against Ike, you can find them easily. In each section, I will also explain how the matchup is generally played, what moves are good, what situations to avoid, and general mindfulness as the Ike player. Now, without further ado, let's nair into it. So, first and foremost, I'm going to start with Aegis. Now, there's something I want to keep everybody in mindfulness of as I make this tier list, and that this tier list is not based off of the current metagame. In my tier list, I base my list off of what I think the meta is going to look like when it develops more and more over the course of 2 years. And you will see how that drastically influences my opinion, because I do not believe that the current metagame is an accurate representation of how the game will be played in a year or so. So, with that being said, Aegis. I think Aegis, as it currently is quite bad. But I think as we discover more ways to trap her ledge options and her bad recovery, and just making trades with Mithra, I think that this matchup will generally trend towards even. I think some of the best moves in this matchup are unironically Ether, down tilt, and up tilt, because as long as you can force trades and force them off stage, you can just blow Mithra and Pyra up. Next on the list is Banjo and Kazooie. Now this matchup's really annoying. It's really annoying because Grenade tends to beat out Nair, and he has some moves that can contest Ike in the air. But that being said, you can still often just Nair through the Grenade. I think that Banjo Ike is still Ike favored. Next we come into one of Ike's harder matchups, Bayonetta. I think that Bayonetta pretty solidly beats Ike. I think that HBK is one of the better moves to beat Ike. Her airspace control is quite insane. Ike has a frame 4 air dodge, making Bayo combos that weren't previously true, and just generally this matchup is very annoying. As the Ike player in this matchup, you're going to want to hold shield a lot, and you're going to want to ether or grab the HBK slides, or bear when she hits your shield with rising HBK. Next, we have Bowser. Now, Bowser is one of those matchups where I just assume that he's 50-50 for everybody, but especially so for Ike. This character will just make you guess, and he's heavy, and you're basically just going to have to keep trading and guessing, and it's not fun until smash up B, and if you don't space right, you'll get hit by it, and even if you space right, he might just drop shield and grab you. Just a generally even matchup. Next, we have Bowser Jr. I think Bowser Jr., as opposed to Bowser, is significantly easier. Bowser Jr.'s car gets beat by fresh nair, bair, up air, down air, F tilt, up tilt. It gets beat by a lot of moves. The main thing that you have to keep in mind is that your item control with the Mecha Koopa has to be on point, or else he can do some very tricky things. You also need to be aware that he has very wonky shield break setups at ledge, and if you're caught off guard, he will get a very early kill. Next on the list, I've got Byleth. I think that Ike actually does quite well into Byleth. I think that Byleth really struggles because he's even slower than Ike, so it's one of those matchups where Ike can actually leverage his speed in the matchup. And I think that as we figure out more of messing with Byleth's recovery and sort of keeping them at ledge and not letting them do their ledge shenanigans, that this character will get worse as time goes on. Next up on the list, I have Captain Falcon. Now, I used to think that Captain Falcon was a slightly losing matchup, but I've since changed my position. I think that Captain Falcon is actually slightly Ike favored, but is an extremely volatile matchup. If you do not know what you are doing with your frame 4 air dodge, Falcon will hit Nair 1 on your face, and then he will kill you on the spot. Up tilt is an insane move in this matchup, and another thing to keep in mind is that grounded Raptor boost is actually pretty safe from Ike grab because it's so small. So a lot of the time, you just have to jump over Raptor Burst as opposed to shielding it. Next up, I've got Chrom. Now, Chrom is one of those matchups where Chrom just has a -4 matchup into back throw off stage. Basically, as soon as you can put Chrom off stage, you can kill them on the spot, or at least put them in a situation where they have to guess for their entire stock. And it's for that reason that I don't think Chrom will go much higher in the metagame, even though his neutral is insane, because all you really have to do is call him out once or twice to put him off stage, and then you can kill him. Next on the list, I have Cloud. Now, once again, Cloud was one of those matchups which I used to think was very heavily against Ike, but as I've experienced the matchup more and more, especially going offline, I actually think that this matchup is slightly Ike favored. And I say this mostly because Cloud's recovery is another one of those exploitable recoveries where a lot of the times he's just going to die early for no reason. Down tilt 2 framing, eruption at the ledge, reverse ether. There's just a lot of ways to mess with his recovery that he can't really answer for. And I don't think his neutral is enough to make up for it. Next, I have Corrin. And now Corrin is one of those weird matchups where it's actually even. And it's even because Corrin has a very similar game plan to Ike. She has very similar hitboxes and moves. What makes it generally even is that her tilts on the ground, unless perfectly spaced, always get punished by ether if they get shielded. So she has to play very aerial and very antithetical to your style. Basically, you want to be on the ground, making sure that she can't take into the air and anti-airing her instead of the other way around. Next up, we have Peach and Daisy. Now, Daisy was one of those matchups where I felt like it was not winning for a long time until I learned that sometimes you just have to mash your approach. Daisy is one of those matchups where you have to consistently be applying pressure so she cannot pull turnips. If you are allowing Daisy to pull turnips, then she will be a hard matchup for you. But if you deny turnip control, she actually does not have very many tools to contest your nair or your down tilt. She's just too slow and her hitboxes do not hit in the right spots. Next up, I have Dark Pit. And now I think that Dark Pit is Ike winning. I think that Dark Pit doesn't have the hitboxes to contest Ike in a good way. I think that Ike's down tilt is one of the best ways to kill Pit's recovery. I think that the recovery is one of the biggest things that holds Pit back besides his hitboxes. Neutral is generally even. The buff to Orbitars made it so Pit's disadvantage was quite good, but it is still not enough to compensate for just how hard it is for that character to really recover with down tilt 2 framing his recovery. Next up, I have Dark Samus. Now, there's a pivotal difference between Dark Samus and Samus, and that is Dark Samus's jump is significantly better than Samus's. So, when I think that Dark Samus is a 55-45 matchup, that is almost exclusively because her jump is that much better. Next up, we have Diddy Kong. Now, most swords have a pretty bad matchup into Diddy, but fortunately for Ike players, I think that Ike actually slightly beats Diddy. I think that once you understand your use of the banana as an Ike player, you can better make use of it than Diddy can, and since you can actually approach the banana with your nair and threaten a safe landing area while grabbing it, Diddy has a very hard time. But much like Peach, you must consistently apply pressure, or else if you let him have his banana and his way, then it is an entirely different matchup and it will not be fun for you. Donkey Kong. I think that Donkey Kong is one of those matchups where as a newer player you think this matchup is very hard. But once you figure out how to consistently edgeguard his lackluster recovery, once you figure out that his neutral game is basically just bear and dash attack, I think you can very easily dismantle his kit, keep him in disadvantage, and make sure that the Donkey Kong does not get his way. Just avoid getting blown up by air slaps and dash attack into shenanigans, and this is a perfectly doable and easy matchup. Next up, I have Dr. Mario. Now, Dr. Mario mains, even after the buffs, totally in shambles. This matchup as a Dr. Mario main, I imagine, has to be one of his worst matchups. It just does not feel good. His recovery gets gimped, his neutral is bad, you can nair through pills, you can avoid the cape by going low with quick draw. His kill confirms are good, yes, but they're extremely hard to hit on Ike, and he has a very hard time whiff punishing due to his very slow speed. Duck Hunt Dog. So, Duck Hunt Dog is one of those matchups where I think it generally is just dead even. And the reason I think that is because Can is one of the strongest tools in the kit and often makes it so that it can actually zone Ike efficiently. You combine this with Gunman, which makes it so a lot of your Nair confirms don't work, or when you're approaching with Nair, they drop the Gunman and then shield, and then your Nair is unsafe because you hit the Gunman. Just generally, this matchup is quite hard, and I would say it's even. Falco. The Spacey agenda isn't real. Ike beats Falco. I think Ike beats Falco 55-45. And the reason I think that is not only recovery, but once you start understanding that up tilt 1 hitting your shield is up beable on reaction, you can very easily dismantle this matchup, because Falcos love to mash that move, but fortunately Ike has a unique and good answer. Secondly, Falco's neutral outside of just annoying laser, which isn't good risk reward, just does not handle Ike in an efficient manner. Ike's neutral can out-neutral Falco all day. Fox. Once again, not a believer in the Spacey agenda. I think Fox is very slight Ike winning. I think it's one of those matchups where you just have to accept that you don't get to play the game a lot of the time, and you just have to take risky trades in order to get him into bad positions. A lot of matchups that I consider, well, most Ikes consider to be bad, I think you just have to continually take trades and hope for better outcomes, and not in terms of winning neutral, but just making sure that you trade enough to win. And I think Fox is a perfect example of a character that you can continually take hard guesses with ether callouts, grab callouts, or just generally making risky moves to beat him, even if he's winning neutral more than you are. Alright, now, I hate to say this, but Ganon is an even matchup for Ike. It's sad, but true. Ganon's up smash is one of the biggest deterrents that Ike will ever see. His slow speed doesn't really matter because Ike is also pretty slow, and his moves hit so hard that he is kind of doing the reverse of what I said to do to Fox. He is trying to trade with you, and he can trade enough to where I believe this matchup is honestly even. Greninja. So a lot of players complain that Greninja low profiles a lot of their moves and can kind of dash under things. Well, fortunately for Ike, Nair just hits everywhere. The best thing I can say in this matchup is that you need to understand that, once again, like Fox, you are not trying to win neutral more than Greninja. All you're trying to do is take favorable trades to make it so that he loses in the long-term risk-reward game. I think that short hop landing counter to bait out approaches to make them think twice about punishing you is a good idea. I think that mixing up slow falling with Nair is one of the best things that you can do, because if you slow fall, they try to whiff punish, you might hit them because they go too preemptively. It's just generally a slightly Ike favored risk reward game, even though his advantage state is quite strong. Hero. Hero's one of those matchups, just 50-50. Sometimes he's going to pull out the right spells at the right times, and it's going to feel like it's yikes. Sometimes he's going to pull out a hocus pocus and kill himself, and it's going to feel 70-30 or better. But just generally, with Hero, you never know. Ice Climbers. So I think Ice Climbers is 70-30 or better. This matchup is pretty easily described as Ike spam Nair, funny Nair go ha ha ha. And Nana and Popo can't really do much about it. You can punish Squall, you can punish a lot of the shenanigans that Ice Climbers do when they're approaching with Ice Breath and Ice Sickle to kind of zone out less range characters. You just have a lot of answers for what they can do, and separating Popo and Nana as Ike is one of the easiest things to do. Incineroar. So, Incineroar is just one of those characters which just unfortunately is slower than Ike and has no range. So despite the fact that for some characters he can outtrade and win, with Ike he just can't get a hit. I think this matchup is incredibly stacked against Incineroar. Inkling. So I think Inkling is very slight Ike favor. Inkling has an incredibly large Booyah window on Ike, so you need to understand that in this matchup, when you are at Booyah percent, that you need to be basically mashing jump, and so they cannot Booyah you. They will fish for it, and you need to be aware of that. As long as you avoid the Booyah, this matchup is extremely hard for Inkling, even with their ledge trapping. Isabelle. Now, Isabelle isn't as bad as some of the other ones that I'm saying on this list, but Isabelle is still a very easy matchup for Ike. Ike handles the slingshot really well. He can chop through it with Nair. He can down tilt the gyro, F tilt the gyro. Just you have to avoid the memes with the fishing rod on stages like Kalos Pokemon League and Town and City, because if you get reeled while they're standing on some of those platforms, you could die at ludicrously low percents. But once you understand how the fishing rod works, how to play around gyro and playing slow and patiently to get your openings in, I think that Isabelle is a very winnable and easy matchup. Oh, it's Jigglypuff. So, I used to think that Jigglypuff was 70-30 or better. I used to think that Ike had one of the easiest matchups in the Jigglypuff. Ever since the buffs, though, I'm actually moving Jigglypuff to 60-40. You need to be extremely careful in this matchup. Puff now can kill you off of one stray hit that just hits you right. She will chase you off the stage and make your recovery impossible. Good Puffs will track you and hunt you down. But as long as you understand that your neutral game needs to be played perfectly, I think this is generally heavily Ike winning still. Joker. I think Joker is a even matchup for Ike. I know, it's probably a hot take. I think that for the Joker-Ike matchup, Arsene is a significant enough nerf to his recovery that as long as he doesn't get Arsene at very opportune times, then this matchup is actually slight Ike favored. On the flip side, if the Arsene timing is good for him, or he counters your attack and he gets Arsene more than he should, this matchup becomes 45-55. But I think generally, Joker Ike is just like a volatilely even matchup. Next up, Kazuya. So, Kazuya is another one of those crazy matchups where Ike actually heavily wins it, but if you didn't know how Kazuya operates, if he lands one hit on you, you are going to die. I've experienced it many times where I have zoned Kazuya players out for almost the entire match, and they grab me and hit me with Electric Wind God Fist, and I'm just dead. So even though this is Ike favored because he doesn't have to interact with Kazuya a lot like other characters do, you still have to be very aware of what his hitboxes are, when his invincibility is, and how to punish his offstage game. Getting used to his weird jump and two-framing it is important for this matchup. Ken. Now, I am a Ken optimist for Ike. I know that most Ikes think that Ken is a good matchup or Ken has a good matchup into Ike. I actually think that Ike beats Ken. I don't think Ken has the neutral game to contest Ike. One of the scariest things that Ken can actually do is short hop approaching neutral air dodge into down tilt. And if you're getting to the position where their best approach option is to just nair dodge into you, I think that's a good matchup. Just generally, you have to stay out of his range at all times. You have to understand how his recovery tree works and how to spike Shoryuken and when you can counter it and when you can't. You have to know when you need to SDI his combo hits. You need to be aware of heavy up tilt shield breaks. If heavy up tilt ever hits your shield, you need to be mashing up B. It is better to mash up B in a lot of situations than it is to take the hit that Ken is going to hit you with. King Day to Day. King Day to Day, King Day to Day, King Day to Day. The next couple characters have me pretty sad. So King Day to Day is actually even for Ike. As it turns out, he actually has a lot of good tools to contest Ike in neutral, and he is such a heavy character and such a weird statistic of fast falling that he can make this matchup even. And if you don't believe that, well, play some good DDDs and you'll see that it's just kind of even. Even with the two framing of his up B, because of the technology that DDDs have to hold down and super armor to grab the ledge, they can easily pull out a lot of tricks and survive anyway, and they will survive to ridiculous percents. King K. Rool. So King K. Rool recently got buffed. I used to think that King K. Rool Ike was just barely Ike favored. I now think this is a dead even matchup. Sure, you can spike Crocopter, but it's just not enough. Like, K. Rool actually has the neutral to contest Ike now, and he has stronger kill moves and better approaching options. Overall, K. Rool has become a significant threat to Ike, and playing some of the best K. Rools, I can admittedly say this is an even matchup. Kirby, 70-30. Pretty easy 70-30. Spam Nair, don't get cheese, free matchup. That's about as quick as easy as it can get. Link. So, Link actually has a lot of upcoming technology. I think at the current stage of Link, it's actually even. But the problem is, I understand that Links are going to get better at their bomb loops, they're going to get better at their confirms, they're going to get better at bomb control. I think eventually this matchup will be pushed against Ike, and I think that it's only a matter of time before that happens. I don't think it'll go much past 45-55 against Ike, but I do think that Ike will lose this matchup. Little Mac. So I used to think that Little Mac was 70-30. And you'll say, ha ha ha, Little Mac bad recovery. But they have buffed this character. And not only have they buffed this character, but Little Mac actually has so much speed that it is hard for Ike, and he can actually whiff punish quite effectively. Having played some of the best Macs, I can earnestly say that this matchup is 60-40. It is not 70-30 or better. If you sleep on Mac, he will show you that he is not a character to be messed around with. Lucario, 70-30 or better. So Lucario wants to live to high percent and hit you with nasty kill confirms. Fortunately for Ike, everything kills. Nair kills, bear kills, F-tilt kills, up-tilt kills. All his moves kill. Lucario's recovery is quite good, but his neutral is quite bad and his hitboxes are poor as well. I think this is a 70-30 or better matchup. Lucina. So Lucina has moved around a lot in my tier list. I used to think that it was even, and then I used to think it was slight Ike against Ike, and then I used to think it was really heavy against Ike, and then I used to think it was Ike's worst matchup. But now, after a lot of settling and examining exactly how we could counterplay Lucina, especially with parrying Nair 1 into punish with up B, or parrying a lot of their blade dances in up B without having to guess if they're going to end it, I actually think, much like Link, this will eventually be 45-55. As the Lucina metagame progresses, I think the Ike metagame will progress equally as far and as fast. Luigi. Luigi is just one of those matchups where I used to think it was 70-30, but depending on your stage list, Luigi falls into one of two categories. He'll either be a 55-45 or a 60-40. And if your stage list always allows you to go to a triplat, this matchup is 60-40. But if your stage list makes it so that you have to go to a dual plat like Small BF or Smashville, this matchup is 55-45. I'm going to give Luigi the benefit of the doubt because I think that the Luigi metagame actually still has a lot to progress, and I think that Luigi will actually become a threat for Ike, unless you're on triplats where he's 60-40. But in the meantime, 55-45. Mario, kind of the same boat as Luigi, except in reverse. If your stage list allows you to ban all triplats, especially Yoshi's Story, I think that Mario is closer to 60-40 than 55-45. But if you get forced to go to a triplat, this matchup is easily 55-45. So once again, going to generously give Mario the benefit of the doubt, put him in 55-45. And Marth. So as opposed to Lucina, who I think is 55-45 or 45-55, I actually think that Marth is a very easy matchup for Ike. The inconsistency in kill options actually means that he struggles so much in this matchup that he shouldn't. If he had consistent tippers, this would be a real threat of a matchup, probably worse than Lucina. But fortunately, they're just not. So, Ike generally wins it. Eruption being able to beat both Lucina and Mars up B in a lot of instances is quite a powerful tool in the matchup. You can actually stand far enough back to where Eruption will hit them, but they will not hit you. You can also just stand on the ledge, and the up B hitbox will extend your Eruption hitbox and make it so it's easier to two-frame them. But generally, I think Marth is 55-45. Next up, I've got Mega Man. I used to think Mega Man was even, Um, but and then I thought Mega Man might have been Ike winning. But I truly believe that as the Mega Man item game progresses and their kill confirms come in more and their optimizations come in, I think that this matchup will even out. I don't think it'll go much past even because Ike does have good options against Mega Man, but I do think that Mega Man's metagame as it progresses will exceed Ike's current metagame. Meta Knight. So I used to play some of the best Meta Knights in the region, so I think my opinion of Meta Knight is quite biased, but I think that this matchup is 60-30. I think that Ike just generally destroys Meta Knight. If you have excellent SDI and you know to avoid his dash attack and you know how to DI the grab and SDI the up air ladders, this matchup is pretty heavily Ike winning. He dies very early. You have good answers to a lot of his jumping shenanigans because your up air just hits in all directions in every way possible. So does Nair. Just he can't do a lot of the things that he wants to do. Mewtwo. Mewtwo is one of those matchups where the hurtbox changes weren't enough, and then he just gets nicked. And getting trades against Ike is almost never good for the opponent, especially somebody as light as Mewtwo. He'll try to hit you, you'll be swinging as well, you'll trade, and that trade is exceptionally good for you. You also have insane kill confirms. He doesn't have insane kill confirms relative to yours. You just have to watch out for getting randomly down smashed or F smashed at ledge. But generally, I think this matchup is 60-40 because of Mewtwo's obscenely bad hurt boxes. Mii Brawler. So, a lot of people said Mii Brawler was the future Fox. I actually think that might still be true. I think that Mii Brawler is about as equal as a matchup as Fox, and just like in the mannerisms of Fox, you play the same way. There are a couple key things to avoid. Don't tank on a platform if you can avoid it to save your life. Down throw Thumper will kill you at 60 on any normal stage, or 40 if you're on Yoshi's Story. Basically though, as long as you can avoid some of that cheese, this matchup is still slightly Ike favored, even as I think the Brawler metagame will progress. Mii Gunner. So Mii Gunner is annoying. If you don't think this character is a real character, you're wrong. I think, though, Ike still wins it. I think Ike wins very narrowly. You have to be very aware of the projectiles they can bring in. You have to be aware of their skill sets and what they're bringing to the table. Because moves like Stealth Bomber, if you are not ready for them, will absolutely devastate your game. Knowing how to push your advantage state in this matchup is most of the matchup. Mii Sword Fighter. So Mii Sword Fighter, I've had a lot of experience with some of the top Mii Sword Fighters. And I will say that at the start, I used to think this matchup was dead even, but as I learned to parry Tornado and then dash attack, or parry the Chakram on reaction, and then come in, basically playing offline, I think this matchup is actually 60-40. I think this matchup is really bad for Mii Sword Fighter. When he does down throw up air is not true, not even on Ike. As long as you DI out, you're fine. Just keep that in mind, learn to parry Tornado, know the distances of which you can punish, and this matchup's pretty easy. Min Min. I used to think that Min Min was Ike's absolute worst matchup. I've since changed my opinion. It's only his second worst matchup. So, in the Min Min matchup, you basically get to get hit 3 times. She'll hit you once and reset you back to the ledge, and you'll be at like 20 or 30. She'll hit you again, and you'll be able to recover before she can screw you over. And then she'll hit you again, and you're guaranteed dead. So basically, even offline, I don't think that this is going to become a better matchup. I think that Min Mins, as they get better themselves, this matchup is going to stick here and stay here. Key things to note is that on ledge, Min Min's ledge jump is quite bad, so that is something that you can abuse quite easily. But dying in 3 hits and how slow Ike is, you have to be pretty much on your A game to beat this character. It is not a fun matchup, but it is definitely doable. Mr. Game & Watch. Now, historically, Ike is the Game & Watch Slayer. This is my favorite matchup in all of Smash Ultimate, because so many characters struggle against Game & Watch, and I'm over here sitting with my Ike privilege of Nair, and thinking, wow, this character's terrible. Very easy matchup, spam Nair, try not to interact with him. When you're getting juggled, just focus on getting back to the ground, and don't let him get away with spamming down smash or up smash. Just play slow. Don't get baited. Ness. I used to think Ness was even. I've since changed my opinion. I think Ness, as his metagame progresses, will actually get worse relative to Ike, especially as you get different option selects from PK Fire and what you can do out of his very specific combos. I actually know the inventor of Ruski Loops. Ruski Loops are very annoying. You need to be very aware that if Magnet hits you in the wrong way, you are going to die at 0. But as long as you avoid his bad neutral and his inability to get in, Ike can put Ness into disadvantage and just kill him on the spot. So I think this is very slight Ike winning. Olimar. I think Olimar is slight Ike. Olimar, one of those characters, he just craps out damage. He's going to stick Pikmin to you. Nair doesn't always get them off. If you're throwing out up tilt to try to get them off, they'll sometimes put you in so much lag that Olimar can run up and throw. You need a lot of matchup knowledge to beat Olimar. You need to know which Pikmin is out and when. You need to be paying attention. You need to be focusing on killing purple Pikmin when it's the optimal thing to do instead of chasing Olimar. It requires a lot of matchup knowledge. But I think that the Olimar metagame won't get better than the Ike metagame, and I think that at the current state and the future state, Ike will continue to win this matchup. Pac-Man. Once again, I think Pac-Man is one of those characters that Ike just beats. Hydrant, as opposed to many characters who can't handle that, Ike can just up air from different angles and hit him out of the Hydrant, and then he can't land. Secondly, Ike has a very good time handling fruit and handling Pac-Man's weird boxing options. Ether is one of those moves in this matchup that's very strong. Ike can actually mess with Pac-Man recovery. Knowing how to neutral air dodge through his trampoline to take the last hit is important. Knowing his recovery routes is important. And making sure to add as much damage as you can as a recovery tax for Pac-Man is also important. You should not let this character get back for free. The neutral game is generally even, but once Pac-Man gets in the disadvantage, he can get blown up like every other character. Palutena. So Palutena used to be way down here. That was back when Palutenas could land right in front of your shield with fair, -3, and then they could force the worst 50-50 in the game. They could grab you faster than you could grab them, and they could also nair faster than you could do anything. So if you tried to ether and they grabbed, it beat it. If you tried to jump and do anything, you'd probably get grabbed anyway. Ever since the fair nerfs, though, I think this matchup's even. Or not even, but rather slight Ike favor. I think that Palutena legitimately has a hard time with Ike. As long as you know how to work around Bear, and you know that you can throw Ether into Bear to beat it when she's trying to, say, bait you into attacking her, you can really throw Palutena's off. Her recovery is a super easy 2-frame, her projectiles are easily reactable, and her game plan is honest and easy like Ike's. So, as long as you know what you're doing, I think this Ike matchup is Ike favored. Pichu! Pichu is just slight Ike winning. I'm going to talk about this matchup more with Pikachu, so I'm just going to get into the next one. Pikachu! Slight Ike winning. I think that Pikachu and Pichu are generally both in the same category of very, very slight Ike winning. I think a conservative Ike might put Pikachu and Pichu in even, but there are a couple things that make the matchups much more tolerable. For Pichu, obviously it's the self-damage. For Pikachu, it's the fact that when you are crouching, a lot of his short hop rising aerials won't hit if you're spaced, and that is a very important aspect of the matchup. That means that, say, if you land spaced nair and he tries to bury you out of shield or fair you out of shield, and you are crouching, it will entirely whiff, and you can punish with up tilt. It's very important to know when you should be ethering through T-jolts, when you should be parrying into down tilt, and how they want to approach you in general. What you really need to avoid doing is letting them approach with the T-jolt. Make sure they cannot do that. Move around constantly. Nair it out of the way. Don't just shield it all the time. Piranha Plant. So Piranha Plant, 70-30, Ike winning. Piranha Plant just can't recover, can't land. You can outspace Batui with Nair. You can outspace Batui with Dare. You can do a lot of weird things to Plant that he just can't handle. I think that Ike just slams Plant. Pit. So here's where a lot of people are going to differentiate. I have Dark Pit in 55-45. I have Pit in even. And the sole reason is arrows. Arrows just put such immense pressure on Ike both off stage and in neutral when he's running away trying to camp you. That I think that as Pit Arrow game evolves, that Pit will become an even matchup for Ike between Arrow's calling out jumps and his active Nair and his fair and his edge guarding. I think this matchup will become even. Next up, I've got Richter. So I used to think that Richter was even, but a dear friend of mine showed me that actually this matchup is slight losing. I think that as Richter's develop their metagame more, this character will actually get much, much better. I think that whips are very strong. I think that his projectiles are actually good. I think that his tilt is one of the craziest tilts in the game. The fact that the tilt goes so far, is so safe on shield, and does what it does, really makes this character an absolute hell to fight as Ike. I think you're going to struggle a lot. Keep in mind though that Ike has the third best ledge hang in the game, so a lot of the times Holy Water just won't hit you. F smash has to be perfectly spaced. Down smash also has to be perfectly spaced, and sometimes it'll just whiff anyway. Ridley. I think Ridley is 60-40. Ridley suffers from what I call BBS, big body syndrome. He just gets hit when he shouldn't, and he throws out moves, and the moves make him get hit when he shouldn't. His recovery is skeptical at best, and his landing options are poor. He just gets juggled into oblivion and can't really win neutral. You'll zone him out, he can't really contest you in a lot of assets. This is a pretty heavily Ike winning matchup. Oh no, it's Rob. So Rob, you have to have not only an immense amount of matchup knowledge, but you also have to understand your gyro combo game, your gyro situational awareness, how to grab gyro perfectly with your moves, how to nair catch gyro. You need a lot of tech to fight Rob. But I think once you have that tech, this matchup is even. And I think that as Ikes develop their metagame around gyro, around laser, around Rob's cheesy options at the ledge, I think this matchup will become even. I just think that currently, if you were to ask Ikes right now what they thought it was, they would put it probably next to Min Min. But I think in the future, this matchup will be much more bearable. Robin. Robin is a 70-30 matchup, but for weird reasons. For those who don't know, Robin has the mechanic of Levin Sword, the Arcfire books, and his or her recovery with those books. Once you become very strong at analyzing their resources and punishing them for their windows of vulnerability, this matchup actually becomes very easy. It's very hard for them to continually zone you with their slow speed, and they have to spam Levin aerials in order to properly keep you out. And then once Levin goes away, as long as you can get in those windows, you'll find this matchup is very easy. Kind of the same thing for Rosa and Luma. Rosa and Luma just kind of get destroyed by Ike. Luma just always randomly gets hit by Nair and then dies. Rosalina's super tall. She gets hit by Landing Bear, Rising Bear. Her recovery is really bad. Her landing options are bad. She's super floaty. There's just a lot of things going against her in this matchup. Roy isn't our boy. I am going to do the hottest of hot takes. I think that as the metagame progresses, Roy will actually become a worse character. I think as people generally get better at edgeguarding his recovery, better understanding of his guess for game gimmicks, and avoiding cheesy stocks, I think that Roy will get worse. At ledge, you need to be very careful. You need to be aware of his guess for game situations, and you need to abuse the fact that Roy down tilt doesn't do much if it hits you, and it's very hard to hit Ike's ledge hang. Basically, I think that right now, you could argue that Roy is a very tough matchup, but as Ikes get better at it, and Roy's try to get better at it, I think Ikes will win out, unironically. We've got our boy Ryu, the Yamato Spirit. Right next to Ken, same exact reasons. You can nair through Hadoken, you can nair through Shakunetsu. There's a couple things to keep aware of. For one, you can't down tilt the Tatsu, and sometimes your F tilt will also clank with Tatsu, so you have to jump it. Secondly, Ryu's anti-airs aren't as good as Ken's, so generally you would think it would be easier, but I think that Ryu's Hadoken game is strong enough that he can keep in the same ballpark as Ken. I used to think Ryu was easier, but I have since changed my opinion after playing some very strong Ryu players. Samus. So as I said previously, I think that Dark Samus has a significantly better jump than Samus. I'm actually willing to put Samus right next to Dark Samus, but I do think that Dark Samus is a harder matchup. Full charge shot doesn't hit like ledge hang, which is very fortunate for us. So just keep that in mind and just try to avoid getting cheesy killed by like say half charge shot into forward smash sweet spot. You don't want to die like that. Sephiroth. Um, I think Sephiroth, as the metagame progresses, will be easier for Ike. I think that currently the one wing angel mechanic is the only thing keeping Sephiroth in any sort of relevancy. I think that once we get better at playing around the timings of that and getting the kill that we need, I think that Sephiroth will become easier for Ike, not the other way around. Another thing to keep in mind is that a lot of the time you can counter his aerials when he's trying to approach or zone you, and you will hit him. And it's one of those matchups where he explodes. He's tall, he's big, he's light. Basically, once again, you're not playing the I'm going to consistently win neutral game. You're playing the I just need to take efficient trades and make sure he dies before I do type of gameplay. Sheik, for the same reasons listed as Fox, Mii Brawler, Sephiroth, this character will viciously oppress you with her frame data, but as long as you know when to use your reversal and when the gaps are, I think this matchup, as the metagame progresses, even as Sheiks develop more technology, will still immensely struggle with Ike's unique countering tools with Ether, up tilt, down tilt, and Nair. I think that her lightweight is a big problem. I think that inconsistency for her will eventually not be a problem, but I think by that point, Ike's will be efficient enough at two-framing her recovery and hard calling out her approaches that this matchup will generally be Ike favored. Now, Shulk is a weird one. I don't think Shulk can be humanly played strong enough or fierce enough to ever exceed even. Now, the theoretical value of Shulk for every character in the game, I truly believe, would be yikes, but you have to put in the human element. And I think that Shulks will not be able to exceed the even matchup margin. Their up air is quite bad. Their bear is non-existent, basically, relative to ours. Their recovery is quite exploitable. Basically, the best thing that you need to do as Ike is avoid getting cheesed by speed art or jump art by getting gimped off stage. I don't care if you have to hold shield in center stage till you're at a high enough percent to where he can't fair train you. As long as you're not dying to the gimps, this matchup is incredibly hard for Shulk, even with dial storage memes, which, by the way, are quite annoying. Snake. So for those Snake haters out there, well, you're in luck. I think Ike beats Snake very slightly. Snake is one of those characters where you put him at disadvantage and that's where he stays, and Ike's very good at that. I think grenades are very annoying, and Snake is very good at trading, but Ike is about the same way to Snake, so Ike doesn't mind trading either. Just generally an even matchup. Just avoid getting up tilted, and be aware of your down throw situations. Sonic, Sonic, Sonic. Sonic is the yikes matchup. Sonic is our worst possible matchup. The easiest way to explain it is spin dash, good move, Ike slow character. It's just bad. You're basically going to be forced to guess by using counter or nair, and it's not going to be fun. I don't know what to do in this matchup yet. Perhaps somebody could help me with it, but I currently think that this is Ike's worst matchup. I think it is generally like 35 to 65, but no worse than that. It is definitely still a winnable matchup. Sora. So Sora still just dropped, and for anybody who's been playing, you've probably realized he's incredibly floaty. This character cannot land. I don't know what they thought with that, but Ike just hits Sora with Nair, and then Sora just has to call an ambulance because he can't get down. I've seen a lot of clips on the Twitter, obviously, of Sora killing you in one interaction, but I don't think he can get that interactional hit good enough to where this is any better for him than 60-40. Magic's too slow, his approach options are telegraphed, the gaps between Fair 1 and Fair 2 and Nair 1 and Nair 2 are too big, His jab mix-ups don't work on Ike because as soon as jab 1 hits your shield, you can just spam ether. His fair mix-ups don't work for the same reason. Generally, I think Ike is just going to very heavily win this matchup. Steve! I think Steve is... I'm going to put Steve in slight Ike. I've been hit by enough Zero to Deaths and Steve memes to come to the realization that despite Ike having a way better neutral, there are just a lot of times where he will hit you once in a good way and you're just going to die outright, even with good SDI. I think as the Steve metagame progresses, this will be where he ends up. Terry Bogard, are you okay? I'm okay. As it turns out, I think Terry, much like Kazuya, is one of those characters that blows you up off of a couple hits. I think that Terry can do it a little bit better than Kazuya can because he has Crack Shoot and Power Wave to kind of help his approach options. But for the same reasons as Kazuya, once you understand his recovery tree, once you understand how to gimp him, once you understand how to avoid his neutral memes, and you know when you can take trades, I think this matchup will eventually become this heavily Ike favored. Toon Link. So I used to think Toon Link was way easier than it is, but now I think it's just slight Ike winning. I think his ridiculous speed and tilts being safe on shield from ether is quite annoying. I think that bomb shield pressure is very good on Ike, and he also gets some very weird bear trains if he hits you wrong. I just think this matchup is barely Ike winning. I think that you can blow him up because he's floaty and his recovery is quite bad, but he does have a tether to kind of make up for it, so just slight Ike. Villager. So Villager, much like Isabel, pretty easy matchup, very floaty character, very small hitboxes, relies on a projectile that you can nair through to get his game plan going. Just generally, I think this matchup is pretty Ike favored. I think that once you understand how to work around Slingshot and Lloyd, you'll quickly understand that Villager doesn't have that many threats. Wario. So Wario, I used to think was even, and then they gutted his up tilt. I now actually believe that Wario Ike is 60-40. This is one of those matchups where Ike wants to be a very jumpy type of player because Wario's approach options aren't very strong and very safe, so you just want to make sure that he can't get a clean hit on you. Taking stray hits is fine. You have a very good time edgeguarding his recovery, and this neutral is quite poor as long as you're also staying airborne. If he hits you with straight upper, that's not too bad, like I said. The worst thing that can happen is he gets a clean hit on the ground and combos you into waft. Just be aware of those situations and avoid them. Wii Fit Trainer. Wii Fit Trainer, definitely a 60-40 matchup. Ike generally destroys plankers, so Wii Fit plankers are going to get absolutely wrecked. Wii Fit also has a very hard time against Ike because Big Sword go whoosh, and she doesn't really have a strong anti-airing option, except for like Rising Frontal Fair, which is a very wonky hitbox and doesn't reward much. Just generally, I think that Ike will progress his metagame enough to where Wii Fit's not going to be a problem. Wolf. So, Wolf is one of those matchups where if you were to kind of break it down right now, you would probably put it in 45-55 Ike. But the thing is, with option selecting on his recovery, knowing when to react to the side B or up B, and knowing the angles that he can do to delay, I think that this matchup, once we get that down, as well as some things in neutral that I think Ike players aren't properly punishing, such as like Blaster, I think that Wolf will generally become 55-45. His advantage state is very, very strong versus Ike, and Ike's disadvantage doesn't help that. But Wolf, like Fox, like Falco, but to a lesser degree, has a very exploitable recovery. And I think that holds him back in the matchup. Yoshi! Yoshi, one of those matchups, solid +1. He just has a really hard time getting in. He has a really hard time getting down a lot of the time, even with the double jump. He has a really hard time using eggs. Just this character struggles a lot to get in on Ike. And like a lot of characters, once he gets hit by Ike, he kind of gets blown up. Another thing to keep in mind is Ike actually has strong enough hits at mid to high % to knock Yoshi out of his armor from his double jump. So you can actually kind of fair him off stage at higher % and he'll just die, whereas other characters don't have that privilege. Young Link. Young Link, another slight Ike. I just think that his recovery is really bad. I think that his zoning is just alright versus Ike. I think that his anti-airing options aren't great, and I think that the gaps, once you understand the gaps in his shield pressure from his frame data, and you know when you can ether, or when you should run up, or when you should drop shield for an option select, I think as we learn to do those things, Young Link will become a worse character. Right now, I think they can generally mash on your shield because players don't know when to drop shield for an OS parry, but I think that will change as time goes on. Zelda. This character just got buffed, my guys. This character just got buffed. I used to think that Zelda was 60-40 or maybe even 70-30, but I am now going to honestly put her in 55-45. She now has jab 1, down smash, true combo at certain percents. And if that hits you as Ike, you are dead. And jab is pretty safe. So, scary character. Her zoning is quite good versus Ike, but I don't think her metagame is ever going to progress past much what it is right now. I think that Ike's metagame will continue to improve as we learn to better two-frame her recovery or at least punish it and reacting to her up B and how to generally avoid her kill confirms. I think this matchup will become Ike favored. Zero Suit Samus. So, after playing some of the best Zero Suit Samuses in the business, I can safely say I truly believe that ZSS Ike is even. ZSS running into the classical ZSS problems of just can't trade, has weird hitboxes, up B doesn't work all the time, moves don't work right. ZSS do be struggling. And since the Nair nerfs to make it from -2 to -5, that was a significant change in the matchup as well. Similar to Palutena, ZSS had some broken pressure strings because Nair being -2 meant you couldn't challenge at all. But now that it's -5, I truly think it's an even matchup. Up air covers a lot of the flip kick shenanigans, and just ZSS is too inconsistent. I think she'll even out here. I think as the metagame progresses, they'll be even. I've got Pokemon Trainer and Lucas last as a special treat for some of my closest friends. I think that Pokemon Trainer is slight Ike. Now, if I were to break down individual characters, it would be like this. Squirtle would be beating Ike, Ivysaur would be losing to Ike, and Charizard would be losing to Ike. Ivysaur more so than Charizard. Ivysaur, incredibly floaty, Charizard, incredibly big-bodied, Squirtle, incredibly annoying. I honestly think that if you were to just stick to Squirtle, that matchup might be slight Ike disadvantage, but I do think that over time it will become Ike favored. Over time. And now for last but not least, I've got Lucas. Oh, Lucas, Lucas, Lucas. I think that Lucas is worse than Ness. I think that Lucas is worse than Yoshi. I think that Lucas is one of Ike's easiest 60-40s. I just do not believe that he has the tools to properly contest him. I think that Lucas can't land, can't approach, and even with snake dashing, he is just not that great. And this is a Master Swordsman's matchup chart. Now, I believe Ike is a very strong character, a contender for unironically top 3. And I think that as our metagame progresses, this is what our matchup chart is going to look like. So if you want to pick up Ike for a specific matchup, like these in the 70-30 or better, I would highly recommend it. He's an easy character, and you can definitely pick him up for matchup charts like that. Thank you for coming to my video. My name is Lana Lanale. For those who don't know, I'll say it one more time so you know how to say it for the future. Lana Lanale. And thank you for coming, and thank you for listening.